Alright guys, so all the legendary lantern amps have been out for a little bit now. Let's go ahead and put them in a tier list. What's going on everybody? I am Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails. Welcome to the channel, feeling a bit better. Working on maybe kind of a big project with another game. You'll see one of them for sure, but I don't know about the other one. It might be something I end up doing on like a second channel or something. But who knows, we'll see. Let's go ahead and rank us our amps. You can see here that I have S through C. Honestly, none of these are really below C tier. I'd say giving any of the lantern amps a C tier overall is probably like if you're going like pretty harsh on the scale. Let me know if you guys want to see an overall Escalation amp tier list. That would of course be a pretty long video. There's tons of amps. There'd be a bit of work involved, but if you guys want to see it, let me know. Give me like 300 likes on this video or something. I don't know. Are we gonna do that now? Cringe like goals. All right. So what might you ask would I put in C tier of any of these legendary lantern amps? And I'd probably have to say that the Embermain legendary amp is a C tier. It's just not the greatest of the amps. Like, yes, you do get a damage pool that stays there the entire rest of the fight after you activate it, and then that also gives you attack speed when you're in that damage pool, but it's just not as strong as these other legendary amps are. And these damage ticks really aren't that big. I'm pretty sure your Pangar Lantern does more. Speaking of which, the Pangar Lantern, I don't know if we put Pangar Lantern in C tier or B tier. It's probably a low B or a high C because, you know, the extra access to adrenaline is crazy good. It's like crazy good. But if you're not running adrenaline, then there's really no point in it. And then the only other feature of this amp is the fact that it now follows you around. I'd say it's probably a C tier. I'd say it's probably a C tier. You have to be running adrenaline for it to really reach its full potential here. And even then, if you are running an adrenaline build with this, it's probably not the most optimal because the other legendary amps are just better. All right, next in this sort of group down here, probably Drask Lantern. Drask Lantern, I'll give Drask Lantern a B. I don't think it's terrible as far as the legendary amps go, but it's definitely on the lower end of things. It's definitely on the lower end of things. At least it does deal a good bit of damage with those shock spires, but they're really not great. Honestly, it could be a C, probably below the Pangar Lantern, so I guess we'll do that. Even though you need a specific build for this one, you don't really need a specific build for this one. You know, what you get out of these all is just kind of underwhelming in the scope of legendary amps. Koshai Lantern amp is also like kind of underwhelming in the scope of what a legendary amp is, but it's actually got a fair bit of DPS increase behind that. You know, if you have the Aether Drive tonic on, you go from 10 seconds down to 4 seconds, but if you don't have the Aether Drive tonic on, then you go from 30 seconds down to 5 seconds on your lantern cooldown, which is actually really crazy. So you probably would put the Koshai Lantern, honestly, Koshai Lantern could even be A tier, but since we're thinking in the scope of the legendary amps, it's probably a B tier. It's pretty solid up there. All right, and now we have the really good ones here. So Broadside Lantern, after getting nerfed down to 7 cannonballs instead of 10, probably not one-shotting a ton of things with that. Probably weren't one-shotting a ton of things to begin with, but it was actually very good. You know, it was at least half HP if you aimed the lantern correctly. I think we'll do A tier because I think the one-shot potential is just not quite as there as with the other things. Actually, no. We're going S tier because even when you fail to one-shot something with broadsides, you're still doing a ton of damage. A ton of damage. I don't know if it's necessarily still like the best lantern amp, but it's definitely there. It's definitely there. It's got to be S tier. Then Shrike Lantern amp, double hit. Honestly, this is, would I call this the best? I don't know, because you can one-shot stuff with Pangar balls, and you can go full damage setup, which is kind of an important factor here. I'd probably, you got to put Shrike Lantern S tier in my opinion. I'd say the thing holding it back from being better is the Shrike Lantern itself not being as like good as the other lanterns, just because you have other sources of attack speed typically. But all right, my Skarn Lantern amp. So I basically suggested the design for this thing, and if it were working as intended, I'd probably put it A tier. You know, it's really good for Bastion slams. Actually makes Bastion relevant in Radiant Escalation. But because it's super broken right now, it's the top of S tier in terms of, you know, like the Bastion cooldown resets the Skarn Lantern amp duration. So you actually end up just one-shotting a ton of stuff because your shield goes over cap that it's supposed to be. This really should be hard capped at like 4,000 shields or something because you never get that much HP in the game, right? You never get over 2,000 HP, like actual HP in the game. So this should be hard capped at like 4,000. But since it isn't, and then the Bastion just resets its duration right now, it's actually just crazy overpowered. You know, you can hit 1,000,000 plus damage with it if you want to, if you have the patience to do that. Not that you would ever need to hit Chronivore for 1,000,000 plus damage, but you could if you wanted to. But let's not judge it because of a bug with shield interactions. Let's judge it based on what it could potentially do normally, and that would probably be an A tier. You know, it's very solid. It's probably not one-shotting stuff. It's probably in the same boat as Broadside when it's not, you know, but to get closer to this sort of output, you'd have to be running tough, which is not optimal, of course. So I'd probably say it's going to be an A tier. And then Virulent Impact. Although, do I put it in A tier then? Because with the Skarn Lantern, you're basically running Skarn Lantern and then Bastion on top of that, and then bam, it's literally broken. That's what makes it an S tier because it's broken. But when if it ever gets fixed, which probably will, then we're just A tier on that because it's still going to be pretty good. But to get the one-shot potential out of Virulent Impact, you have to be running particular weapons, particular builds, whereas with the Skarn Lantern amp, you basically just have to run the Bastion Omnicell. Any weapon can achieve what the Skarn Lantern amp has to offer. Same sort of thing with the Shrike as well. Like, any weapon can make benefit out of this 2x damage increase, basically. As a caveat to the Shrike Lantern, though, you do need to be running the Aether Drive Tonic for this to be as effective as it can be, right? Because that will be 2x all damage all the time when you are running the Aether Drive Tonic versus, you know, when it's not up, you won't be getting that bonus. I think this is what we're gonna go with, right? I'd still say Broadside's probably still the best, even with 7 cannonballs instead of 10. Shrike Amp is behind that because it just doubles your DPS output, but sometimes in certain scenarios, this can just, you know, delete half to 75% of the behemoth's HP. So, you know, obviously that's still going to be better to get an instantaneous deletion of HP rather than an overtime double DPS. But the Skarn Lantern Amp currently, with the Bastion interaction bug, is the king of the HP deletion, but when it gets fixed, you know, your cap is probably going to be around 4,000-ish. You could probably get to like 5,000 or 6,000 shields with a dedicated shield build, but then your Bastion Slam isn't actually going to do as much damage because you aren't going to have room on your build for those damage increases. So I'd probably rank it under the Shrike Lantern if it were working as intended. But since it's not, you know, obviously it's S tier. And then Virulent Impact, for you to get the most out of this amp, you need to be running a Sharpened Axe build, basically. You can run like a Sharpened something else, but you need to be running Sharpened for this to work the best that it can, to be able to get that one-shot potential. Plus you need to rely on other amps to really get that one shot like very consistently, right? You need the Transcendent Spite amp to boost your crit damage by 125%. Seeing as you have to rely on other amps to give you the most out of this, then that's probably why I'd say Virulent Impact's an A tier. As far as the legendaries go, if we're talking about overall Escalation amp rankings, like I'd probably say these are both an S tier. Even when this gets fixed, I'd probably still put this in like an S tier because, you know, you still have the galvanized synergy there as well. Probably put the Koshai Lantern amp in like A tier overall. I don't know if it would be an S tier overall, but it'd be an A tier overall. But then these things stay down where they are. Like not the craziest of amps in terms of the legendaries. and there are certainly non-legendary amps that are better than at least the Ember main amp. So yeah, guys, this is pretty much what I'm thinking for the Dauntless legendary amp tier list. Again, let me know if you want to see like every Escalation amp in a tier list video. That'd probably be a long one. Definitely can't ramble on in detail like I did in this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you have anything switching positions here? Of course, do the algorithm stuff. Drop a like for me. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. And I have been Trevor. I go by the Mr. Trails, and I will catch you guys next time.